Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 series Rescue the Rockies. And it is finally draft day here in the 2039 season. Before we get started, want to thank all of our loyal viewers. Hope you have been enjoying the holidays and enjoy the holidays going forward. As you can probably tell from the pace of videos, things have gotten a little bit quieter for me recently. Hoping to have more videos coming out, particularly over the next week or so when I'm hoping to not work quite as much as I typically do. Start off this episode talking about a few things that we've done, although we haven't moved the game forward since we took a look at the draft and who was on the board for us at the end of the last episode. We have made a couple of potential moves with this team. One, Bernie Barrera, our number 3 starter, who's a good, solid major league starter, making a little bit over $9 million this year and set to become a free agent. Began speaking with Barrera, who looks like he's on pace to win 16 or 17 games this year, a season after leading the National League with 19 wins a year ago. Began having conversations with him about what it might take to bring him back. He is definitely not an ace type starter, but we do really like that he's major league average or a little better at everything. And he's an Iron Man in terms of his injury proneness, with the fact that Noah Schultz, who was our number 4 starter at the beginning of this year and now is out for the year, almost certain to move on. Felt like we wanted to try to lock up Barrera. He was looking for 6 years at about $14.5 million a year with a player option for the 6th season. That was richer and longer than we wanted to go. We've offered him a 3-year, $39 million contract with no options that will take Mr. Barrera, if we are able to get him signed to that amount, into his early 30s with us. We'll find out what happens with that, hopefully in the not too distant future. And we also made a trade. We've got a new shortstop on board, Eleniker Coronado. Total rental and a perhaps somewhat risky rental. He's almost 32 years old. He's wrecked physically. We're going to be playing him at short, where he's not even completely trained up at this point, at least initially. He's more experienced as a second baseman, but solid infield ratings, pretty good base running instincts, and a bat that has typically been about a major league average bat over the course of his career. We did actually inadvertently play our game today after we traded him for him already. You can see we won that 7-2. Obviously, we're still waiting to complete the first-year player draft, and we'll need to do that before things are complete. He's under a contract where in the final year, making $14.2 million, the Blue Jays were already retaining 80% of it, so there was only 20% of the contract left. We got the A's to keep an additional 5% of that, so cost us a little money to rent him. What it ultimately did allow us to do was not give up too much to bring him on board, since he's not a big-time player. Can see what we traded. Minor league reliever Kevin Willis, certainly not a big part of our organization. The 28-year-old was with us in Double-A after we had signed him as a minor league free agent. Looks like the A's are weak enough that he's going to be on their major league roster, but he was not a big part of our team. We did also trade away Jose Gonzaba. You may remember him, a minor league contract that we signed to the international free agent a couple years ago. He had gotten brief opportunities in the majors with us over the last season or so. Combined 0 for 10 with 7 strikeouts in those opportunities. Not the best personality. Certainly, you can see that the A's are going to be using him, but didn't feel that either Gonzaba or Willis were a big part of our organization. Doesn't mean that we won't look to make another trade for an infielder over the next 3 weeks before we get to the trade deadline. But at this point, Coronado is cheap, gives us another left-handed bat in the lineup, and allowed us to really adjust the starting lineups a bit. Derby Mahez, who has been very good defensively, but is hitting just 209 on the year with a 64 WRC plus, goes back to being our shortstop only against left-handed pitching. Take him out of the lineup against righties and put Coronado into the lineup against right-handed pitching. He'll be learning, or more accurately, refining his ability to play short at the major league level in the coming weeks and months. But against right-hand pitching, he is still a pretty decent major league bat. That also allowed us to send back down to the minors the young infielder who had done nothing offensively for us this year. Don't necessarily think that Ted Slade is a big part of our future. We're going to play him at first base down in AAA going forward every day, but he had struggled mightily this year. So the hope is that we're helping the roster a little bit, although it did mean that since Slade was playing against he had been playing against righties and lefties. More recently was playing only against lefties. We do have to put Eric Mokeen, the left-handed hitter, in as a designated hitter for us for the time being. So not optimal to have a lefty versus lefty matchup for your DH, but it is what it is as far as the lineup now with the additional lefty on the team in Coronado. Certainly could lose a little bit defensively by now having Mahez back out of the lineup, but his offense had been so troubling this year, and Slade had been so bad this year, that my hope is that even though Coronado could end up getting hurt, we didn't spend a lot to invest in him. Still have the option to make another trade if we need, since we're only paying 15% of his salary, and we'll see what he can do for us in the coming days. And we did get some good feedback from the Worldwide Scouting Department on how to perhaps pursue this draft. 4 different players with first place votes from the Worldwide Scouting Department. They did end up being the 4 position players that I had kind of honed in on towards the end of the last episode. So good to know that I'm looking, I think, at the right 4 people, or considering the right 4 people, but certainly do not have a quorum as far as how the Worldwide Scouting Department thinks we should proceed. Checking in on a couple things brought up. Kevin Bowles, the catcher picked up by Tampa. Dustin Durbin wanted us to check in on him, college catcher out of Central Michigan. The bat looks like it could be more than respectable, particularly if he develops that home run power, and a pretty good looking defensive catcher with high adaptability and work ethic. So not surprised to see him go 6 overall. 9th overall was Josh Nunn. Got a lot of commentary from him, the likes of Ravenspawn 3, Sir Valerian, and Dustin Durbin. He was projected to go 13th in the mock draft. He went 9th overall, and I think the general consensus, looking at his profile, is how he didn't go right at the top of this draft. But C-Dub Nunn certainly looks like he could be a very interesting player for the next decade or so. Would assume that once he is signed, he could make the jump right to the major leagues. Final player that was also mentioned by Dustin Durbin went 20th overall, starting pitcher Jerry Jordan. Certainly looks like a pretty good, interesting prospect for the Boston Red Sox organization with where he went and where we're picking. Never was really a realistic opportunity for us to consider him. 2 other players that did not make my short list that members of the Worldwide Scouting Department wanted us to at least check in on. Sean Simpson ended up being Why Me 943's second choice. The catcher, certainly a very interesting contact hitter, some positive personality traits. I'm a little less excited about him simply because the defense looks only average behind the plate. Raven Spawn 3 also was intrigued with some of these catchers, but did kind of acknowledge my main concern was that none of them look all that great defensively. But it is conceivable that if one of these catchers falls to us in the second round, perhaps there could be good value there, even though they aren't looking like they're going to be Pudge Rodriguez behind the plate. Another guy that was requested we check in on came from Jarek Braxton, and that's looking at the 6'8 switch hitting first baseman Ben Battaglia out of William Jewell College. With that 6'8 height and some respectable ratings for a first baseman, certainly looks like he could be outstanding defensively, like the high leadership and baseball IQ. Honestly, though, the bat for a first baseman just is not that exciting to me. Going to be kind of average-ish in everything, except he will draw some walks if he continues to develop. He only hit 288 this past year at William Jewell College, which I don't think is a premier college baseball program. Can't say I've ever heard of William Jewell College before today, but Liberty, Missouri, I'm pretty confident it's not a Division I powerhouse. Does have a 448 on base percentage, so he does draw an insane number of walks, and he's been doing that in the draft league as well. Interesting idea, an interesting player to look at that I hadn't spent much time with. I don't think, though, that he's a guy that I'm going to go in the first round simply because I just don't think the bat is special enough to kind of justify playing him at first base, even though the defense there certainly seems like it could be excellent. And now, as far as what we are going to do with our first round selection, mentioned there were 4 position players who kind of made it onto my short list, and they all received at least one first place vote from the Worldwide Scouting Department. The most anybody got was 2. So I don't know that there is a clear recommendation from the WWSD as far as where to go. But we'll talk through those players right now and then make our choice. Jeff Krisman, the third baseman who was projected to go 11th in the mock draft, certainly a wide variety of support. The top of YME 943's list, second choice of DLL first base 14, and both Raven Spawn 3 and Sir Valerian had Krisman third on their list. So is certainly an interesting player to consider. Looking for $6.5 million, not special defensively. But if he does reach his full potential, certainly has a bat and a skill set that indicates he could be a good defensive first baseman with a well above average major league bat. A lot of work for the 18-year-old to do, but we do see his contact, gap power, home run power, and eye all being above average to potentially outstanding if he reaches his full potential. Like the loyalty and work ethic, don't love the low leadership, but June Krisman, certainly a popular player to consider. Center fielder Adrian Nelson, second place vote from Sir Valerian and a third place vote from Raven Spawn 3. So the left-handed hitting outfielder gets some attention. Like the durability, like the high adaptability and work ethic. Looks like a guy who could play multiple positions defensively in the outfield, probably most naturally a right fielder with that decent arm, or maybe a left fielder. Contact can definitely be average-ish range. I think the gap power, home run power, and eye could all be well above average if he reaches his full potential. Similar to Krisman, a lot of development ahead of him, but a lot of time for him to make those improvements as well. Center fielder Luke Martinez was the choice of both Ravenspawn 3 and Dustin Durbin. Martinez projected to go with the 10th pick in the second round. So if we want him, now is the time. Nelson was projected to go with the 32nd pick in the first round. So right before where we are selecting right now is when he's selected to go. Martinez, a good defensive player, good speed, like the high adaptability and work ethic. Contact, still in an average-ish, maybe slightly above average range. Think the gap power and the eye could both be outstanding, and the gap power for an 18-year-old is further along. The home run power we think can get to be above average, but he has a lot of work ahead of him to get there. Do like his durability, and the demand is lower than both Chrisman at $6.5 million and Nelson at $3.6 million. Final player who received attention from the worldwide scouting department, the college third baseman Luis El Capitan Escobar. He was the recommendation of DLL First Base 14. Both Cervalarian and Ravenspawn 3 had him as their fourth choice on their lists. Escobar projected to go with the first pick in the second round. So if we want him, probably need to bring him on board now as well. The demand of $1.1 million, certainly cheaper as a college junior. Looks like he doesn't want to go back for a senior year at Cal State Fullerton. The defense is adequate for a third baseman, certainly not great. With his 6'4" height, he could definitely play a very good first base. Like the high adaptability, speed is average, although he does have decent base running instincts. Ultimately, it's going to be about the bat with El Capitan. Got some work to do as far as his contact. His gap power and his eye are pretty much major league quality. The power, a little below average as far as home runs, but we think it could be much better. Is almost 23 years old, so you're going to hope that a lot of that development that we think is there in front of him happens over the next year or two in terms of reaching his full potential. But Escobar would give us some potential help in the infield in the nearer term than going with any of the high school players, Martinez, Nelson, or Chrisman. And I've spent some more time offline thinking about things and have made a decision. We'll kind of talk through the red flags with each of these players before I let you know what we've ultimately decided. Starting with Jeff Chrisman, the positives are if he reaches his full potential, it's the most well-balanced and I believe the highest end bat out of anyone to consider. The defense is nothing special. Don't love the low leadership and doesn't bring much to the table in terms of his ability to run the bases. But ultimately, as I said, I think the bat for Chrisman is the best overall. Adrian Nelson, probably the bat that I like second most. Like the durability, the personality traits with the high adaptability and work ethic are positive. Similar to Chrisman, he's got a lot of work to do to get fully developed, but would have an outstanding bat if he does reach his full potential. Nothing special defensively, but a more than competent corner outfielder. Center fielder Luke Martinez, another guy like the durability, like the high adaptability and work ethic, the best range among the players we've talked about, best speed among the players we've talked about. Worry a bit about the home run power, but we think the contact can be average or slightly above, and the gap power and the eye could both be excellent. So certainly an interesting prospect to consider as well. And then the college boy, Luis Escobar. Don't love the defense at third base, but it's certainly survivable at third base. Don't love the low loyalty, do like the high adaptability and the low financial ambition. The speed is nothing special, not a good bunter. clearly much more developed in terms of his bat than the high school players. And if he reaches his full potential, the bat is not all that different than what we think we could get from a Chrisman or a Nelson or a Martinez. Guy who we think the gap power and the eye are both borderline excellent, plus home run power and kind of average-ish contact. Do you think that Chrisman's bat is ultimately the best overall? Um, but there's certainly something to be said by a player like Escobar, who is 4 years older. And although on the contact side in particular, he doesn't have quite the same ceiling as the other players, he's a lot closer to reaching his ceiling than any of the high school players. And he's got a pretty high floor at this point. The other thing that I do like about Escobar, even though we've talked about him as a first baseman or a third baseman, does have the ratings to play a more than competent left or right field for us defensively as well. Maybe if you get lucky in the development lab with him, he could turn into a solid infield or outfield defender at those corner infield and outfield spots. And ultimately, as I mentioned, Chrisman already expected to be off the board with the 11th pick in the first round. Adrian Nelson already expected to be off the board with the 32nd pick in the first round. Luke Martinez expected to go with the 10th pick in the second round. And Luis Escobar expected to go with the first pick in the second round. So all of these players are expected to not be available the next time that we are making a selection. And we are going to go with the young college player, Luis Escobar. Just think he's closer to being able to help us soon. As I noted, I think Chrisman in particular, if he reaches his full potential, has a better bat than Escobar, driven primarily by his ability to make contact. But there's a lot more execution risk around those high school players. So we are going to go ahead and meet Luis El Capitan Escobar's demand and hope that someone else we really like falls to us with the 34th pick, although it will be shocking if it's any of the players that we just spent time talking about who were very highly regarded by the worldwide scouting department. Auto drafting to our next pick behind our selection of Escobar. Chrisman went with the first pick in the second round to Salt Lake, the expansion team. Ben Battaglia from William Jewell College, who, as we mentioned, Jarek Braxton was interested in, went with the 9th pick in the first round. Center fielder Luke Martinez, 17th in the second round to the Dodgers. Catcher Sean Simpson goes 19th to the Braves in the second round. Jason Fowler, starting pitcher that we liked, goes with the 27th pick in the second round to Washington. Cortez Mendoza, who we talked about last episode, goes with the pick right before ours. The last guy that we were talking about was Adrian Nelson. I'm pretty sure he got picked somewhere and I missed him. Yeah, he went with the 6th pick in the second round to St. Louis. So not surprisingly, all of the guys that we have been talking about are off the board. Kind of expected that was going to be the case. Hopefully Escobar will work out well for us, but we will track how those other players do over the courses of their careers. Starting pitcher Pat Migdal, a guy who we also liked as a college prospect. Expected he would be off the board, and unfortunately he is as well. And last guy to mention, Harry Sanders, probably the starting pitcher that we liked the most, was projected to go with the 23rd pick in the second round, and he went higher than that with the 7th pick in the second round. So kind of expected that anyone that we really, really liked was going to be off the boards by our second pick, and the rest of the league did not disappoint us. And there are still 2 of the 9 position players that we talked about in the last episode who are still on the board. So these are guys who slid a little bit from looking at the pitchers who are available. There's really nothing exciting to me. So definitely going to go with one of these 2 players. One is the third baseman, Eddie Johnson. He was projected to go with the 25th pick of the second round, so a little bit of a surprise that he's still on the board for us here. Bat, in terms of the potential, that's actually similar to several of the other high school players we were talking about in the first round, a little younger than them as he's not 18 yet. His contact and his home run power a little behind some of those other guys, but ultimately average-ish contact with plus gap power, home run power, and eye is certainly an interesting combination. Not materially worse of a potential bat than the likes of Chrisman, Nelson, and Martinez, who were higher rated prospects as I think they should be. Not an exciting defensive player in terms of his skill set, but he does have a certain amount of versatility there. The speed is pretty average, like the high leadership and the low financial ambition. The demand for him is not all that high, so Eddie Johnson, definitely a player to consider. The other is Mario Manriquez, and although Manriquez wasn't right at the top of any lists of members of the Worldwide Scouting Department, he did get some mentions. Manriquez is a player who was projected to go with the 12th pick in the second round. So the left-handed hitting infielder, a bit surprising that he's on the board. Profile, not all that different than Luis Escobar, although Escobar is a little further along in terms of his development at this point, particularly with the gap power in the eye. But Escobar is also about a year and a half older than Manriquez, so you would expect that to some extent. Manriquez, not an exciting defensive prospect, but if he can really reach his full potential, 70 gap power, 70 eye, and 65 home run power with 60 speed is certainly a combination that you can play in the infield, even if he's not special there defensively. Probably more of a second base type with that profile that he has. Could play third, although you'd like a better arm there. I don't see us playing him at shortstop. Could play first, although he's not huge, 6 feet tall. Could also be a very mediocre corner outfielder. Looking for $3.2 million, but since our first round pick, Escobar, was so cheap relative to the slot, we've got plenty of money available to bring on someone like Manriquez, who would be somewhat more expensive. So Eddie Johnson and Manriquez are the two guys that we're kind of thinking about and targeting here. The question is, do we bring on, in the case of Manriquez, someone who looks very similar to Escobar in terms of his future potential and his ratings? Or do we go with a younger player in the case of Johnson, who we think could have a higher ceiling if he reaches his full potential? And we're ultimately going to go with another college infielder with Mario Manriquez. The money, as I noted, works out about perfectly. His $3.2 million demand is right in line with what we had slotted for Escobar with the first pick, while Escobar's $1.1 million demand is just below what we had slotted for our second pick. So we're going to go ahead and bring Manriquez on board. Tough to let go of Johnson with that higher potential, but feeling like Escobar and Manriquez could both be pretty important infielders for us in the not too distant future. Like that Manriquez gives us a left-handed bat to go alongside the right-handed hitting Escobar. Going to need to get lucky with their development defensively to really feel like they're going to be superstar players for us, but certainly could always get lucky in the development lab and think that the bats for both of these guys as infielders are pretty interesting to bring on board. Not expecting, since we've got to wait basically 2 full rounds to our next pick, that there's going to be anybody still on the board that we've been talking about at that point. And as we get to our 4th round pick, looking like it's going to be a position player heavy draft for us, at least in the early rounds. Two guys that we've kind of keyed in on here. One is the catcher, Zach Gresser. He's been on the board for a while. 18-year-old, very average looking defensively. What we can say positively about him, high baseball IQ. And although we think he's going to struggle to make contact and strike out an insane number of times, does potentially have outstanding home run power and an above average eye. There are a couple other catchers, though, John Brown and John Pyle, who could very well fall to us in the fifth round. So that's part of the reason why I'm not necessarily going to take Gresser here. The other guy we're thinking about is another infielder, this time a high school infielder in Nick Dyer. Nothing special defensively, although we do like the high work ethic, but we think that his bat could be kind of above average in everything with outstanding gap power. So certainly could develop into a interesting infielder for us in the future. And as we think about the debate between the catcher Zach Gresser and the shortstop Nick Dyer, Dyer projected to go right around here with the 28th pick in the fourth round, so he was projected to be off the board at this point. The OSA views him pretty similarly to how our head scout does. Zach Gresser, there is a big divergence. Our scout loves his potential. The OSA is much lower on him, and he is not projected to go in the first 5 rounds of the draft. Not going to shock me if he ends up off the board, but I think the best chance for us to get both of these guys, or to at least end up with a catcher in the second round, or in the fifth round, our second pick from now, as well as an infielder that we like in Dyer, is to go with the infielder Nick Dyer right now and see whether or not Gresser or one of the other catchers lasts to our pick. And Gresser is still on the board. Looks like John Pyle, one of the catchers that we were looking at, has come off the board since our last pick. But I think we do go catcher here. John Brown, one option, 18-year-old, a little bit better defensively, high work ethic. Another guy, we worry about the ability to make contact, but think that the home run power could be excellent, like the durability, gap power, and eye, both in an average-ish range. Pretty interesting profile for the soon-to-be 19-year-old right-hander. Gresser, a similar profile, quite honestly. Not as good defensively, doesn't have the same durability, but Gresser, we think the home run power could be special. Brown, 75 home run power, honestly, is not too far from being special. And if he reached that full potential, certainly could be where we want to see it. I think we're going to go with John Brown here. As I noted, we are definitely an outlier in the way we look at Gresser. The OSA thinks he's going to strike out an absolutely obscene amount of times. If he's still around in the 6th round, I think we grab him. But the OSA is actually higher on John Brown than we are. Tend to trust our scout overall. But if we were able to go with the catchers, Brown and Gresser, in these 5th and 6th rounds, I don't think that would be a horrible outcome in terms of giving us little potential to build around behind the plate. The issue with Gresser is that demand is certainly going to be well above slot, since there's nothing slotted in for 6th round and subsequent picks. But we do have a little bit of money to play with this year, particularly if we're not going to go crazy with an additional trade following up the one deal that we've already made. So we're going to go ahead, pick the catcher John Brown here in the 5th round. If Gresser is still on the board in the 6th, we'll take him. Obviously, at some point, probably would make sense to start mixing in some pitchers and outfielders with the players that we've selected. But with Gresser still being on the board in the 6th round, we've spent time offline looking at some of these other players. John Lambert, you can see with a $2.6 million demand, is way up there. Don't love the low adaptability and baseball IQ. He's got a similar profile in terms of potentially insane number of strikeouts, below average contact to go with great home run power. But at least Gresser gives us a potential option behind the plate. I think there's a little more value there, even though he's not likely to walk as quite as much as Lambert. So we will go with the sixth round with the catcher, Zach Gresser. So three infielders and a couple of high school catchers in our first five picks over those first 6 rounds here in the 2039 draft. And the draft is over. We did focus a bit more on pitchers and outfielders with our later round picks, but did add another catching prospect as well as another couple infielders into the mix as well. The most interesting prospect in the 8th round was the center fielder, Dan Lang. You can see, similar to Gresser, he's a guy who's looking for more than the nothing that Slot would anticipate him getting. Switch hitter, has that low contact and miserable avoid strikeouts combo that we've been looking at a lot recently, and certainly also went with in the case of Gresser. Do like the potential gap power, home run power combination with a potentially above average eye. Solid speed, pretty good base running instincts, high work ethic, and looks like a competent defensive outfielder. So thought that the switch hitter Lang was decent value for the 8th round. Obviously, if we do end up bringing Gresser and Lang on board for somewhere in $2 to $2.5 million, that's going to limit our financial flexibility a bit. Got about 4.8 million in excess money on top of what we've reserved for the draft budget, and on top of what we had to devote to bringing Mr. Coronado on board. That'd still leave us with $2.5-ish million to potentially make another trade in the coming weeks. So even if we do try to sign both of those guys, doesn't rule out that we can't do something else in the trade market. I'll give you a quick look as to who's on the trade market here with 3 weeks left until the trade deadline before we finish up the episode. Part of the reason we went to with Coronado was that the infield options just weren't that attractive at the higher end. Jesus Made, who we really like his defense, going to be out for the next couple months. Same thing with Yover DePaula, also a good-looking defensive player, but he may not even play again this year. Jason House, we continue to have our eye on him. Like the bats, like the fact that he's a potential two-way player, although, as we've talked about, really more of just a mop-up guy in my view as far as his pitching ability. But the price tag for Mr. House, for a guy who's actually in AAA with the Reno Aces, seems a bit excessive given that they find him unqualified to be on their major league team. But you can see that we have to give up one of the top players in our organization, or one of the top prospects in our organization, to bring House on board in a 1-for-1 trade, which made me think that the price tag for Coronado was a lot more reasonable for a team that's not wanting to necessarily sell its soul to bring a guy like Jason House on board. We don't necessarily need a ton of help as far as the pitching staff. Sungnao Shimada Megavolt remains the premier pitcher who's potentially available. Certainly with his skill set, he'd be a fine addition, although he hasn't been great this year with a 4.38 ERA and 6 home runs allowed in 37 innings pitched. But with the fact that he's making $31 million, even our prorated portion of that over the last 40% or so of the season is going to be difficult for us to bring on board. Thinking about the trade options for him, you can see we've got no one who makes the deal work straight up, largely driven by the financial constraints. If we were to get them to keep most of his contract, there's options to bring him on board. But as you can see, it's pretty similar to House. The top players in our organization or some of the top prospects in our organization are the only ways to rent Shimada, and as helpful as he could be, just think the price for a rental, given the quality of our pitching staff, is a bit high. So, given that I'm not necessarily expecting there's going to be a ton of big trades out there for us to still make, we've made offers a bit below demand to Gresser and Lang. We'll engage with them now, see what they have to say, not necessarily anticipating that we will get either one signed. Might be something where we wait until late August before re-engaging with them. But if we do get lucky and they sign for less than they're asking for at this early point, at least we'll have a little more certainty when we head towards the trade deadline of the amount of money that we're actually going to have available. And we have quickly gotten our first round pick, Luis Escobar, signed. We assigned him to Fresno in the California League. He's actually not playing in the draft league. I'm going to play him at first base there. Don't expect that he's going to be there long. We're going to do our usual thing that we do with some of these college guys and play him a week in the California League, play him a week in the Northwestern League, let some of our minor league fans of our organization get a quick glimpse of some of these top prospects if they want. Presumably, he could end up in AAA in relatively short order. He's should be dominant, as you can see in the California League, so we'll probably only have him there till the end of this week. Northwest League, he looks like he is more than capable of handling that at level as well. So very conceivably, we could have him in the Eastern League before the end of this month of July, but figure we will build up his confidence a little bit by hopefully having him dominate in the very early stages of El Capitan's professional baseball career. And as we get ready to come out of the All-Star break, just going to play a couple of games till we get to Monday, and then we'll finish up this episode. The young catcher, Zach Gresser, not satisfied with our offer that was below his demand, so we're likely to probably wait until August before re-engaging with him, given that the ACL playoffs are finishing up right now, or perhaps have already finished up, and Gresser's not going to get any professional playing time with this year, so don't feel any real rush to get him signed at this point. And we have gotten our second round pick, Mario Manriquez, signed as well. He's also going to be in the California League for a very short time alongside Mr. Escobar. Manriquez, a similar situation. Looks like he should be dominant in the California League, and looks like he can definitely handle the Northwestern League at this point. I think it's a little less certain whether Manriquez will make it up to AA before the end of this year, but would certainly think that he'll be in high A ball before the end of the month of July, and then we will see how he does there and how his initial development as a professional moves along before making subsequent decisions on where he might be playing over the rest of this season. And we ended up splitting our first two games with the Mets coming out of the All-Star break. So we've got exactly 2 weeks now until we get to the trade deadline. We'll focus on that in our next episode, whether or not there will be anything else we decide to do. Still only a 3.5 game lead over the Padres in the National League West, and the Atlanta Braves still half a game ahead of us in the battle for the best record in the National League and the best record in baseball. So a little more competitive this year in terms of some teams that we are battling with. Johnny Castillo, the young infielder, continues to have an outstanding season for us. Third in the league with 29 homers, leading the league with 86 ribbies, and third in the league with a 4.5 batter WAR. Anthony Pack Jr., now healthy once again, stealing some more bases, ranks third in the National League in steals. And our ace, Leo Martinez, tied for the league lead in wins with Phil Burrows and Jerry Gomez. With that, we'll call it an episode. Thanks again to everyone in the Worldwide Scouting Department who shared their thoughts on that draft. We'll find out what Escobar does, but don't worry. We'll also be tracking what the likes of Chrisman, Nelson, and Martinez do over the course of their careers. So you can certainly say that you first guessed me when one of the guys that we didn't pick ends up putting together a Hall of Fame type resume. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.